I want to share with you a quick personal story. I was in the gym working out this past week, and a woman comes up to the pull-up bar next to me, and she proceeds to pull a Lysol can out of her gym bag and spray down the machine. I want to just say that is not the way to supercharge your immune system. That is a surefire way to breathe in a bunch of nasty chemicals that will suppress your immunity. So don't do that. That's not the way that we want to charge our immune systems. Let's talk about things that you can do. Now, number one is obviously building lean muscle. This is what we were just talking about. Being in the gym, we want to build that muscle. Why? Why is muscle so important? Now, ladies, you don't have to look like Hulks, She-Hulks, right? But lean muscle is the key here. So, that term lean, and again, this comes back to resistance training. Why do we want to do that? Muscle serves as a reservoir for proteins. So it's basically a holding tank for proteins that are needed. Remember, when your immune system is activated because of a threat, you will sometimes, what your body will do is it will pull muscle to drive the production of antibodies. Okay, so your immune cells that produce antibodies, these proteins from your muscle are gonna drive the ability to make antibodies. So we can actually use that as a reservoir for antibody production. We can also use that protein as a reservoir for other immune needs. And so if you don't have it, you're gonna be in trouble. This is why what happens when a lot of people get a cold or a flu and they're down in bed for several weeks, sweating, their muscles are wasting away. Their body's tapping into that reservoir. So if you've got a nice solid frame with lean muscle, you're gonna have that reserve tank should you happen to get sick. And this is gonna be one of the most important things that helps you bounce back quicker. So what do we do here? How do we build lean muscle? We could do a whole show on that topic alone, but I think, number one way to build lean muscle is resistance. Resistance exercise, and what I see a lot of people do incorrectly is they focus on heavy kind of cardiovascular training, and this is not really going to build much muscle for you. So don't focus here. You don't want to go to the gym, get on a treadmill or elliptical runner or bike or something of that nature and just pound away doing these things. You really want to have some resistance activity. Now, you don't have to go super heavy either. You don't have to, deadlift 1,000 pounds or anything, but you want consistent resistance exercise because that's what stimulates the muscle to grow and stay strong and create that nice solid immune reservoir. Okay, let's check out some of the research-based links on physical activity and your body's immune defense system. So here we go. We've got exercise immunology. This is, again, this is from the Journal of Sports and Health Science. And so we've got the exercise aspect, acute chronic changes. We get enhanced innate immunosurveillance. So your innate immune system surveillance is improved. It works better, right, with moderate exercise. This is why, just pissed me off so much during, the disease that shall not be named, if you know what I'm talking about, right? When they closed the gyms, this was like a huge mistake for the health and the immune system of people everywhere, right? So the immunosurveillance means your innate immune system, it's how those sensory cells help to identify good from bad. So when you're not exercising, you don't get those benefits. And this is with moderate exercise. It doesn't have to be intense. You also get transient immune dysfunction after heavy exertion. So if you go too heavy, this is where overtraining can be a bad idea, right? So we don't want to overtrain. You don't want to work yourself so bad that you can't walk or function the next day. So don't do that. Then we have the clinical influences. So you have what's called a J-curve effect on acute respiratory illness, which is an improvement in your body's ability to recover from that. You have reduced systemic inflammation in physically active and lean individuals. So what does that mean? What was the fear that we all had, or that many had, was that dreaded cytokine storm, which caused severity of inflammation. But if you're lean, physically active, then you have less inflammation. Systemically speaking, you're less prone to a cytokine storm, and so you get protection in that way. We also know that exercise immune linkages to reduced chronic disease. So again, what were the comorbidities? And what are the comorbidities for any respiratory disease, for any viral or bacterial issue for that matter? The comorbidities are being overweight, but more specifically, not so much being overweight. I think that's a misstatement. It's actually being under-muscled. Most people that are overweight are under-muscled. That's not 100% true, because some of the lean bodybuilders are way, way more than what their BMI by height should say. But they're definitely not overweight in regards to being under-muscled, but it's the under-muscled aspect that really creates the issue. Then we have, again, the nutritional interaction, so that these individuals, carbohydrate attenuates post-exercise inflammation. So if you exercise, you're going to burn through your carbohydrate fuels, right? And so what this is saying is that carbohydrates, if you have some carbohydrates after your exercise, you're going to attenuate or slow down the level of inflammation. So again, this is where after the workout or after the routine, some people do better by eating. So eat something. And ideally, I like somebody to eat something more balanced. And so what that would look like would be like you've heard me probably talk about the rule of thirds: a third carb, a third fat, a third protein, within a couple of hours of that window, and you'll give your body the fuel to recover from that workout routine. And then exercise mitigates effects of aging on the immune function, what they're calling immunosenescence. Senescence just means aging. So a lot of benefits and linkages between staying physically active and fit and keeping your immune system running to full capacity. All right, let's go to number 2 here. Go outside. Again, one of the other defects of advice that we got over the past 2 years. What does outside bring? It brings vitamin D. How many research studies are there on vitamin D and immune function and healthy immune function? There's hundreds of them. I mean, this is not a small area of research. We know for a fact that vitamin D is critical for healthy immune function. We also know that getting into the sun allows your body to produce melatonin more effectively. There's also a chemical called phytoncides. These are compounds secreted by plants, odors and chemicals secreted by plants that have immuno effects on humans, improve immune function. But then we also get outside, we get fresh air, which is also obviously very, very important. It's one of the 7 non-negotiable fundamentals to good health is clean air, right? You've got to have that clean air. So go outside. Again, don't lock yourself down. Never lock yourself down again. Go outside. Stay outside as much as you can to get those immune benefits. Let's look at what some of the research has to say about being outside. I love this. This was from a recent published study out of Japan. And so what they're talking about here is the effect of forest bathing trips on human immune function. Forest bathing, what the heck is that? That's when you go out into the forest and basically take a bath in the fresh air and the chemical aromas secreted by the plants. I'll just read to you from this study. The same measurements were made before the trips on a normal working day as a control. The mean values of natural killer activity, that's a type of cell, natural killer cell, it's part of an immune system function, and numbers of natural killer granulolysin, perforin, and granzymes, these are chemicals secreted by natural killer cells, expressing cells on forest bathing days were significantly higher. So basically this person's immune system had a higher level of natural killer, which are the natural sentry cells of the body, and those chemicals that these natural killer cells are capable of producing, higher concentrations on days of forest bathing versus days of not forest bathing. So again, that going outside stimulates healthy immune function. We want to tap into that. Being outside is critical for a strong, functioning immune system. Let's talk about the other big 10,000-foot obvious elephant in the room, and that's sleep. You all know when you sleep, we all went through this, probably most of us did anyway, where you were young, right, and you were immortal and you were never going to die and you were never going to fall prey to the loss of function of old people, right? And so you would party all night, or maybe it wasn't party, maybe it was stay up all night or whatever it was that you did. and get very, very little sleep, roll out of bed, go to work the next day. Maybe you got 1 or 2 hours of sleep. When you were younger, you could handle that, but today you make that attempt. I won't, personally, I try not to get in bed any later than after 9 o'clock. But sleep deprivation is a big one, and most people today are chronically sleep deprived. It's not that we're all getting in bed at 2 and waking up at 3 to go to work, but it's the chronicity in sleep time. What time should we sleep? What's that time frame where we really need to get ideal sleep for healing and repair? That time frame is sometime between midnight and ideally 2 a.m., but even more specifically 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. If we could idealize our sleep, we would definitely be sleeping in that 4-hour window to maximize our immune system's ability to help us function. And again, most people, I can't say most, many people, they're not getting in bed until midnight. And so they're not falling asleep until maybe midnight 30, 1 a.m. And so then that leaves them with just that 1 hour left, right? Or 1.5 hours of that window of ideal sleep time and recovery. So we definitely, want to consider that sleep as a priority, getting to bed on time. And most of you do just by the nature of your responsibilities, kids, work, etc. But you don't want to let sleep pass you by. Let's talk a little bit about why. Now, this was published, this graphic I wanted to show you over here was published in the journal Nature, and it's all about sleep deprivation. And so let's just blow it up and show you some of the functions, some of the importance of sleep as a rule of thumb. So here we have up the top sleep deprivation, and then you can see down here with that sleep deprivation comes all these different abnormal functions. So what do we get? We get a reduction in Th1 cells, an increase in Th2 cells. That pattern, where that happens chronically, increases the risk of developing cancer, but it also increases your risk of infection. So again, we're talking immune system function. We also know that sleep deprivation reduces natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are our sentry cells that probe and help us fight all the time. We know that it reduces our ability to produce antibodies from B cells, right? And so antibody production reduction can obviously lead to that as well, increased risk for infection, but also poor ability to fight infection. We know it reduces our ability for antigen presentation. What does that mean? That means you have these types of T cells that they have little handcuffs on their surface, and what they do is these T cells will handcuff a germ or a bad guy or something that the immune system perceives to be bad, and it will present it to your T cells. So this you see over here is an antigen presenting cell presenting to the T cell. These things here, we'll call these virus. And so then that T cell can then take action, right? Produce inflammatory cytokines to try to neutralize, that virus. But what we're saying here is that sleep deprivation reduces this communication between antigen-presenting cells and your T cells. And then lastly, on this far right side, we've got inflammatory mediators. So we got lack of sleep increases inflammation. And so interleukin-1, interleukin-6, CRP, TNF-alpha, which is tumor necrosis factor alpha, increasing the risk of not really even just cardiovascular disease, but increasing the risk of multitudes of chronic inflammatory diseases. So sleep deprivation is no joke. You absolutely don't want to embark on this as a strategy to try to sustain your immune system long term. Get your sleep, bottom line. Okay, next one, let's say cut out sugar. Now, a lot of people say, well, define sugar. Does that mean don't eat fruit? Does that mean don't eat things that have glucose in them? No, this is really what we're talking about here is cut out refined and processed sugars. You see here, research shows that uncontrolled blood sugar contributes to an overwhelmed immune system, increased risk for infection and inflammation, right? So how do we know that? One of the reasons we know that so well is diabetics. The research on diabetics, what do we see in diabetics? The high levels of blood glucose over time increases the risk for these guys to have infection. And diabetics are notorious for infection. That's why when they get a scratch on their foot, if they don't check their feet on a regular basis, a lot of times that scratch will pick up an infection and it will go septic, and they can lose their limbs, they can lose their feet as a result of a simple infection. So sugar, we definitely want to control. Let's check out some of the research on sugar itself. Now, I love this one because it's one of the older research studies originally done on sugar in terms of how it can impact and influence the immune system. So we'll blow that one up here. You can see it's published in 1973. So this isn't new information. It's just information that is not widely shared and widely spread. So 100-gram portions of carbohydrate from glucose, fructose, sucrose, honey, or orange juice all significantly decreased the capacity of neutrophils to engulf bacteria. Now, neutrophils is a specialized type of white blood cell. Think of it as your army. Neutrophils are like your white blood cell system's army, and so they're first on the ground. And so when they engulf bacteria, they secrete different types of enzymes to neutralize that potential infectious microorganism. And so what sugar does is it reduces their capacity to Pac-Man, to eat up that bacteria. So this is called a decrease in phagocytic index. And you see at the bottom here, these data suggest that the function and not the number of phagocytes was altered. So it doesn't reduce the count or the quantity, but it reduces their capacity for function. This implicates that glucose and other simple carbohydrates in the control of phagocytosis and shows that the effects last for at least 5 hours. So that's key. So imagine, every couple of hours you're bombing out a soda, right? That effect, every time you drink it, is going to last for 5 hours, right? So it's perpetual as long as you continue to do it. Now, on the other hand, a fast, this is a strategy, immune strategy, a fast of 36 or 60 hours significantly increased the phagocytic index. So, after a sugar bomb, fasting 30 or 60 hours, up to 60 hours, significantly reverse that scenario or increase the ability of your neutrophils to engulf bacteria. So this is just another strategy. We'll call this a bonus reason, right? Fasting improves the immune system, and eating sugar reduces the capacity of the immune system cells to do their job and engulf bacteria and other microorganisms that need to be neutralized. And we also have here, this is a study done on blood glucose regulation in type 2 diabetics. And you can see here lymphocyte levels. This is different kind of cell. Neutrophil is one kind of cell. Lymphocyte is another kind of cell. Remember, lymphocytes are the cells that predominantly police the blood, but also help to produce antibodies. So that's those B cells, those B lymphocytes. But the lymphocyte levels were reduced as a result of hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, in patients with type 1 diabetes and healthy subjects. So it didn't matter whether you had type 1 diabetes or if you were healthy. If you had high blood sugar, your lymphocyte counts were reduced. Then we get this a lot in my clinic. When we're drawing blood on diabetics, we use a lot of technology called lymphocyte proliferation technology, which is where we draw lymphocytes out of the whole blood. And a lot of times in these people, in these diabetics, we have to draw the blood a few different times because their lymphocyte counts are too low and we can't get enough from a single blood draw to get an effective test result back. But you can see here, low relative lymphocyte concentrations have been shown to lead independently to coronary heart disease in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus. Patients with type 2 diabetes have also been shown to have insufficient proliferation of lymphocytes, meaning they won't grow, they won't do their job well, they won't replicate well, due to low expression of interleukin-2 receptors. The present study found decreased lymphocyte counts and increased neutrophil counts in patients with unregulated diabetes. These findings are consistent with published study in which lymphocyte levels were found to be reduced due to hyperglycemia. Patients with diabetes have been suggested to have insufficient proliferation of lymphocytes. Okay, so again, high blood sugar will wreck your body's ability to make good lymphocytes and for those lymphocytes to do their job. Now let's look at this last one here. So you can see here, this is dietary sugars inhibit biologic functions of the pattern recognition molecule mannose-binding lectin. What does that mean? In a nutshell, dietary sugars, in particular fructose, this is the sugar everybody, the TV has told you, corn sugar is just fine. Fructose, high fructose corn syrup is healthy, right? And we know that's nonsense, but again, high fructose or fructose negatively regulate the innate immune system or immunity against viral and bacterial pathogens. So if you're pumping the high fructose, you know, which is what do we use in the U.S. specifically? What do we use most? We use corn fructose as the primary sweetening agent. It used to be dextrose or table sugar from typically beet or sugar cane, but today, because we subsidize taxpayer dollars to grow corn, most of the sweetener in the U.S. is fructose, specifically high fructose corn syrup, and that, again, negatively regulate the immune function against viruses and bacterial pathogens. So keep the sugar out if you want your immune system to work well.